Hey everyone, welcome to the Naughty Shaman podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Carlisle, and I can't wait to dive in to a world where the sacred meets the wild and keeps things totally real. In each episode, we are going to dive into what it truly means to live a radiant life that is unapologetically real. And if you're ready to get started, so am I. Hey everybody, this is Natalie coming at you live from the Naughty Shaman recording studios, which this very early morning, is my beautiful favorite place in my house, the back porch, where things are a little bit wild. There are owls out this morning, and there's a rooster crowing, and I swear to goodness there was a skunk that just walked by. And although I didn't see him, they do tend to leave a little bit of a trace, if you know what I'm saying. So it is a wild, wild morning out here. I couldn't sleep because of this beautiful full moon, and I thought I would just talk with you about some of the inspirations from the week. So this morning, what I'd really like to talk with you about is this idea of belonging and love. It is on my mind this week because of the whole back to school time. And so tonight I want to talk to you a little bit about the difference between fitting in and belonging. And at the end of tonight, what I want to share with you are some ways to call back your soul. So let's dive in. So the reason this is on my mind is because I've been taking the kids back to school shopping. And you know, if you have children, this is a very big deal, especially because I have two kids going into two new schools, high school and junior high. So having the shoes and the clothes, and it's a little bit important. Not as important as it is for some people, but for my kids it is important. And so we got into this brilliant conversation in the car about belonging and fitting in and what does all of that mean. At the same time, I happened to crack open one of my favorite books, who I've talked with you about before, is by Brené Brown. And it's called The Gifts of Imperfection. And look what the first chapter is all about. Belonging and the difference between fitting in and belonging. And so as I was speaking with my kids and reading this book, we were talking about how for some people this idea of fitting in is one of the most important concepts at all, and it is quite different from the concept of belonging. When we're striving to fit in, it's because we're coming from a place inside of that there might be something wrong with us. And so we hustle to get love. We'll hustle with the right clothes, and we'll hustle with the right joke, and we'll hustle with the right face and the right hair and the right comments and the right perfect way to be. And we can really astutely assess situations when we're trying to fit in and figure out who we need to be in order to get the most love. It's a little bit of a chameleon act. There's a sense of performance. And I don't know about you, but I've lived so much of my life from this place of performance. I think back to when I was in corporate America. I think that's when it was at its peak for me. There was such a critical need placed on fitting in. Because somewhere hardwired in our brain is this idea that if we get kicked out of the pack, we might die. Because back in the day, you know, when we were living in villages, to go outside of the safe village walls was quite dangerous. To go it alone was a very scary thing, not because we didn't fit in, but because it was dangerous. Well, now it is less dangerous to stand in our own truth, but it is scary still because it hits us at a soul level. It touches us in some primordial place where we know that belonging is critical. And as mammals, belonging to a pack is actually very essential for our well-being. There have been studies that have been done with primates where they'll put a primate in isolation. And after, I don't remember the exact time, but after many months, this primate displayed severe signs of depression, isolation, illness, disease, and didn't live as long as the other primates who were in community. So at some level, the sense of belonging is very critical for our nature, but we often confuse it with this idea of fitting in. Belonging is something that Brené Brown describes as quite different because when we're seeking to belong, we're coming from a place of worthiness, of a place where we understand our value And we understand our need and connection to other humans, to other people. And so we're coming at relationships from a completely different place of worthiness. And we're not hustling or faking or performing to get it. We're actually being our natural state, and the people that are kind of vibing our vibe tend to find our way. In our New Age cultures, we sometimes call this finding your vibe or finding your pack, finding your little wolves to run with, finding your pack of lions, your pride of lions to roam with, your flock of geese, the flock of eagles that you want to be with. And for each of us, it's a little bit different. So when the kids and I were talking in the car, we were talking about, I wonder what makes this hard for some and easier for some. And it's interesting because in each of us is this wild soul. We are born, shamans would tell this legend in this way, that we are born with this wild energy inside of us that is natural. They have a word for it in Peru called kausai. It is the natural animating force of the universe. It is wild and undomesticatable. And this energy has really just kind of one thing that it does, and it expresses itself fully. And if you can imagine, when you look into the eyes of every human being you see today, that inside that little sparkle in their eyes is this wild force of nature called kausai. When we do not express ourselves fully, or we mute ourselves intentionally for long periods of time, the light can sometimes go dim. Shamans will call this soul loss, and I'll give you some other examples of this. We've come to this planet, let's say, to experience things and to express ourselves fully, and that is a journey. We don't automatically know how to do that as human beings. We have all these fleshy bits, and we don't know always why we came here. We forget who we are. And this is the great journey of life, is to wake up and remember different parts of ourselves and then fall in love with all of the parts of ourselves. Where this gets interrupted is that often we are born with this wild energy, and maybe our wild energy, in order to feel nourished at a soul level, needs a lot of mud and roosters crowing in the morning and wild rain in our face and hair and wind on our skin. And maybe we're born with all of this desire to nourish our soul, but our family has learned that it is much better to have things prim, proper, clean, and perfect. And so we learn over time to diminish our wild nature, and we put it in the closet. And after time, after many long periods of neglect or even abuse, or learning that these parts of ourselves are wrong, we lose access to their power. We lose access to the wisdom of this wildish nature. There are other examples too. Maybe you're born with a yearning in your soul to dance and to sing music and to just dance until you're sweating and your hair is a matted mess. And this is what gives you the greatest joy in life, a full expression of the kausai inside of you. And perhaps your society, your community, your family has judged those things as a little too wild and a little too scary. And so you learn to stop moving the body. You learn to disassociate from the body, and even maybe learn that the body is tempting and bad. And in this moment, the shamans would say, one can experience soul loss. And we lose access to this wildish nature inside of us that is so powerful, so passionate, and such perfect fuel for connecting and belonging with other human beings. So what do we do with this? I have a great story to tell you tonight. I know, you're so surprised that I'm reading a story tonight. This is a story that I love, and it comes from one of my favorite storytellers, Clarissa Pincoles Estes. She's a Jungian analyst, and she takes these old wild stories of the crows cackling and witches and cauldrons and Gretel and Hans in the forest. And then she turns them into these wonderful learning experiences in her book, Women Who Run with the Wolves. And so tonight I'm going to be reading a story from Hans Christian Andersen called The Ugly Duckling, as told by Clarissa Pincoles Estes. It was near the time of the harvest, and the old women were making green dolls with corn sheaves, and the old men were mending blankets. The girls were embroidering their white dresses with blood-red flowers, and the boys were singing as they pitched golden hay. The women were knitting scratchy shirts for the coming winter, and the men were helping to pick up and pull and cut and hoe the fruits of the fields for the first harvest. The wind was just beginning to loosen the leaves from the trees, and more each day the leaves would fall. And down by the river there was a mother duck brooding on her very first nest of eggs. Everything was going just as it should for this mother duck. And finally, one by one, her eggs began to tremble and shake until the shells cracked, and out staggered all of her new baby ducklings. But there was one egg left, a very big egg, and it just sat there like a stone. The old duck came by, and the duck mother showed her all of her new children. "Aren't they good looking?" she bragged. But the unhatched egg caught the old duck's attention, and she tried to dissuade the duck mother from sitting on that egg any longer. "It's a turkey egg," the queen duck said. "Not a proper kind of egg at all. It can't get a turkey into the water, and you know this." And this old duck knew, because she had tried many times and failed. But the duck mother felt that she had been sitting on this egg for such a long time, and such a long time, that it wouldn't hurt to sit just a bit longer. "But I'm worried about that," she said. "But do you know that scoundrel father and of all of these ducklings has never come around to see me once. So I'm just going to sit on this egg just a little bit longer." And eventually the big egg began to shudder and roll, and it finally broke open, and out tumbled a big, ungangly creature. His skin was etched with curly red and blue veins, and his feet were purple, and his feathers were in strange cowlicks, and his eyes were a transparent pink. The duck mother cocked her head and stretched her neck and peered at him, and she couldn't help herself. She pronounced him ugly. "Oh, maybe it's a turkey after all," she worried. But when the ugly duckling took to the water, just like all of her other offspring, the duck mother wasn't so sure, because he swam straight and true. "Yes, this must be one of my own, even though he has a very peculiar appearance. But in the right light, maybe he is even handsome." So she presented him with the other creatures just as her own in the farmyard, and they went for a stroll, and before she knew it, another duck came across the courtyard and bit the ugly duckling right in the back of the neck. And the duck mother said, "Stop!" But the bully sputtered. "Well, he looks so strange and ugly, and he needs to be pushed around. It'll be good for him." And then the queen duck returned, with her red rag on her head, looking very proper. "Oh, another brood, as though we didn't have enough mouths to feed around here already. And that one over there, that big ugly one, well, surely he is a mistake." "He's not a mistake," said the duck mother. "He's going to be very strong. He just laid in the egg too long, that's all. He's just maybe a little misshapen, and he'll straighten out, and you'll see." And she hurried to groom the ugly duckling with his cowlicked feathers. But the others did all they could do to harass this ugly duckling, and they flew at him and bit at him and pecked at him and hissed and screeched at him. And the torment grew worse as time went on. He hid and dodged and zigzagged left and right to escape the torture. The duckling was miserable as any creature could be, because he didn't belong. At first his mother defended him, but then even she grew tired of it all. And one day, in total exhaustion and exasperation, she cried, "I wish you would just go away." And so the ugly duckling ran away. With most of his feathers pulled out and looking extremely bedraggled, he ran and ran until he reached a marsh. And there he lay down at the water's edge, with his neck stretched out and zipped up as far as he could in the water, as fast as he could. And he ran away. He ran from the rushes in the corners of the little pond, and he found 2 ganders watching him. And they were young and very full of themselves, these pretty ganders. And they said to this young duckling, "Say there, you ugly thing. Do you want to go unmarried forever? Why don't you come over here? There's some beautiful young geese just right for the choosing. That's where we're headed." And before he could finish his sentence, 2 shots rang out, and the ganders fell dead in the pond with a thud. And the ugly duckling was so terrified that he dove under the water, and he went way down deep to hide from the shots and the smoke and the dogs barking. At last, after all the swimming, the marsh became quiet, and the duckling ran and flew as far away from that marsh as he could. Toward nightfall, he came to a poor hovel, and the door was hanging open, maybe just by a thread of a hinge, and there were more cracks in the walls than wall. And here lived an old raggedy woman with crows sitting on the fence. And here there was an uncombed cat with mats in the hair. And her hair was in her eyes all greasy and straggly, this old woman. And beside her was an old raggedy hen with crossed eyes. Quite the lot, the ugly duckling said to himself. The cat earned her keep by the old woman by catching mice and eating them, and the hen earned her keep by laying eggs. The old woman felt lucky to have found this duck, because maybe the duck would lay eggs too, big fat eggs, she thought, and if not, then she could kill it and eat it. And so the duck stayed because he felt a little bit worthy. But he was tormented day and night by the cat and the hen, who asked him, "What good are you? You cannot catch anything and you cannot lay anything. You have no value here," they would say. And then the duckling would say, "But what I love best is to be under. I love to be under, whether it's being under the wide open blue sky or under the cold blue water." Oh, and the cat could make no sense of this and rolled its shaggy eyelids. To be underwater, what a crazy dream. And so the cat and the hen made fun of the stupid dreams of the ugly duckling. And the hen could make no sense of this. And so, with no idea why anyone would be all wet by choice, they began to tease the duckling. And in the end, it was clear that there would be no peace for the duckling here either. And so he left to see if he could find anything better down the road. And he came upon a pond, and he swam there, and it became colder and colder. And one day a flock of creatures flew overhead, the most beautiful creatures he'd ever seen, and they cried down to him, and hearing their sounds made his heart leap and break at the same time. He cried back with a sound he had never made before, and he had never seen creatures like this before. What magic was this, and how bereft he felt. He turned in the water to watch them all until they flew out of sight, and then he dove to the bottom of the lake, which he loved best, and he huddled there trembling. He was beside himself with loneliness, for he felt desperate for love for those great white birds, and he didn't understand why. Why did he feel so much love and so much heartache when they passed? A colder wind began to blow, and it blew harder and harder through the days, and finally the snow came and the frost. And the old men had to break ice in the milk pails, and the old women spun long into the night to finish sweaters. And the mothers fed mouths by candlelight, while the men searched for sleep under the white skies at midnight. The young men went waist deep in the snow to go milking, and the girls imagined that they saw the faces of handsome young men in the flames of the fire as they cooked in the winter. And down at the pond nearby, the duckling had swum faster and faster in circles to keep himself from freezing in the ice. One morning, the the duckling found himself frozen. It had gotten so cold that he froze there in the ice, and he felt like he might die. But two mallards flew down and skidded onto the ice, and they surveyed the situation and the duck. And these mallards said to him, "You are ugly." And they barked, "Too bad, so sad. Nothing can be done for you. Such as you are ugly, and we can do nothing for you." And they flew off. Luckily, a farmer came by and freed the duckling by breaking the ice with his staff. He lifted the duckling up and tucked him under his coat and marched home. The farmer's house and the children reached for the duckling, but he was so afraid that he flew up in the rafters, making all kinds of dust fall into the butter. And from there, he dove right into the milk pitcher. And as he struggled out of all of those wet and woozy, he fell over into the flour barrel, making a huge mess in the farmhouse. And the farmer's wife chased him with her broom, and the children screamed with laughter. And then the duckling flapped through the cat's door and outside at last, and he lay in the snow, half dead from fear. From here, he struggled on and on until he came to another pond, and then another house, and another pond, and another house. And the entire winter was spent in this very demanding way. Alternating between life and death, he spent the winter. And even so, the gentle breath of spring came again, and the old women shook out their feather beds, and the old men put away their long underwear. New babies came in the middle of the night, and while fathers paced in the yard under starry skies, they waited for the first cry of the newborn babes. During the daylight, the young girls put daffodils in their hair, and young men studied girls' ankles, peeking out from under dresses. And on the pond nearby, the water became warmer, and the ugly duckling who'd floated there stretched his wings. How strong and big his wings were now that it was spring. He hadn't noticed. They lifted him high over the land. From the air, he could see orchards in their white gowns of spring snow, and the farmers plowing. The young of all of nature were hatching and tumbling and buzzing into life. Also paddling on the pond were 3 swans, the same beautiful creatures he had seen the autumn before, those that so caused his heart to ache. He felt pulled to join them. Oh, but he was scared at the last minute. What if they act even though they don't like me? What if they act and tease me like the other people? What if they hate me and shoo me away or laugh at me? Thought the ugly duckling. But he mustered up some courage and he glided down, and he landed on the pond, and his heart was beating so hard. And soon the swans saw him, and they began to swim toward him. "Oh, no doubt I'm about to meet my end," thought the swan. "This is it." But, thought the ugly duckling, if I am going to be killed, I would rather be killed by these beautiful creatures than by hunters, or by mean ducks, or farm wives, or long winters. I would rather go here with these beautiful creatures. And he bowed his head to await the blows. But alas, as he bent his head down in the reflection of the water, he saw himself a swan in full dress, with snowy white plumage, slow eyes, and big bright wings. And the ugly duckling did not at first recognize himself, for he looked just like the beautiful strangers, the ones that he had admired from afar. And it turned out that he was one of them after all this time. His egg had accidentally rolled into the family of ducks, but he was a swan, a glorious swan. And for the first time, his own kind came near him and touched him gently and lovingly with their wingtips. They groomed him with their beaks and swam around him in greeting. And as the children came to feed the swans bits of bread, and they cried out, "Oh, there's a new one! Look how beautiful he is!" And as children everywhere do, they ran to tell everyone, and the old women came down to the water, unbraiding their long silver hair. And the young men cupped the deep green water in their hands and flicked it at young girls, who blushed like rose petals. And the men took them away from the milking just to breathe air. The women took time away from the mending just to laugh with their mates down by the pond. And the old men told stories of how war is too long and life is too short. And one by one, because life and passion and time passing, they all danced away. The young men, the young women, they all danced away. And in time, the old ones, the husbands, the wives, they all danced away. And the children and the swans, and they all danced away, leaving just us here in this moment, in this springtime of life, and another mother duck down by the river, hatching a new batch of eggs. I love this story of the ugly duckling. It is so magical to me because there are so many of us that relate to this archetype of the outsider, the ugly duckling, the one who doesn't quite fit in or belong. And we begin to believe if we are somehow, our egg is rolled into the quote-unquote wrong family or the wrong time or the wrong place, and we begin to believe that it's not the time or the space that's wrong for us, but that we are wrong. And when we inherit this belief that we are wrong or broken, then we begin to learn to hustle for love and try to fit in by any means necessary, because we begin to believe that it's better to do anything to fit in than to be ourselves and risk exile. And I love the story of the ugly duckling because it teaches that given enough time and endurance and strength, we can find our pack of swans. We can find the ones who we belong with, our soul families. They exist. They might be right there in your bloodline, in the family that you were born into. The ones that you belong with could be right there. If so, count yourself as lucky. But for many, the sense of belonging comes from the soul tribe. And so here are 3 quick tips that you can do to begin to find the soul tribe. It is not an easy task, as you could hear from the story of the ugly duckling. It's a task and a journey of endurance and faith and hope and believing and just getting through sometimes. So if you can do that, if you can hang in there and have just a little bit of faith and a little bit of courage along the way, what you learn to do is take each day and discover things that light your soul on fire. Maybe it's music, maybe it's art, maybe it's wind and oceans and paddleboards and moons, maybe it's the eyes of a beloved. We don't know, but find out what that is. How do you like to eat your eggs? What music brings you joy? What things, when you move your body in certain ways, bring it such peace and happiness? And then begin to do those things with more regularity. That is step 1. Commit to discovery. Commit to growth. Commit to learning. This is step 1. It is a great love affair to fall in love with yourself and to do it every day. Step 2 is once you begin to find things that you love that bring you joy, send up the howl. That is step 2. Send up the howl. Send that howl out into the universe to bring your pack near. Let them know who you are, what you love, all the things you have yet to discover, and all of the things that you don't know and don't do perfectly. Send up the howl, and your pack will begin to come. And step 3 is listen. Because once we send up the howl, our pack mates howl back. And if we're not believing that we're worthy of them, we might miss them. They might walk right past us in a yoga class. They might walk right past us at the beach. They might walk right past us at a dinner. And we might not recognize them as our people. So listen with your eyes, listen with your heart. Listen with your skin, with your ears. Listen with your soul. Because those who belong with you are around you right now. So listen. listen, and believe that you are worthy of belonging. All right, my friends, that is it from this morning. The sun has risen while we've been together, and it is a glorious, glorious day. So thank you for tuning in to Naughty Shaman, where we like to keep the sacred a little wild, maybe a lot wild, and totally real. If you're hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, we are so grateful. Please reach out to us. Let us know what topics you'd like to see covered in our future episodes. Get in touch in the comments because we love to hear from you. And you can reach us on social media.